Perfect Game College Baseball, not too far from Route 66. I'm your host, Daron Sutton. Thanks for spending time with us from Flagstaff, Arizona this week. We've got a great show. Mark Kingston will join us, the head coach of the number one team in the land, if you're looking at RPI, South Carolina, his insights. He also takes a look at the brand new recruiting rules, as will Craig Cozart, who handles all of our content along with Vinny Servino on the college side. It's Kingston, it's Craig, it's our show. Thanks for spending time with us on a beautiful day. Let's get outside. It's Perfect Game College Baseball, and it starts now. The number one team in the nation, as we currently have this conversation with regard to RPI, is Mark Kingston's team at South Carolina. Mark spends time with us now. Mark, thanks for hanging out with us on behalf of Hunter, who's out this week. We really appreciate a few minutes of your time.
My pleasure, Darren. Happy to be on. Appreciate everything you guys do, and disappointed he's not here today, but I guess we'll just have to go one-on-one.
Yeah, he took a little time to himself. He's content creator crazy, so we'll give him a break. He manages to work more than when he used to play 162. But the great thing, Mark, and this is an aside, he loves this sport. He loves college baseball, so we'll get you guys connected sometime soon. I want to ask, as everything changes over the next couple of days, I make a mistake if I don't have a coach of your stature on and ask you about the recruiting changes, how things will affect college baseball, how you see it through your eyes, and a successful recruiter as you've been, but how you see things changing here in the weeks, the months, and the years to come.
Well, everybody has their own opinion, right? Everybody thinks it's good for this reason, bad for that reason. And there's a lot of layers to this as it relates to coaches, players, parents, travel ball coaches, organizations. It affects a lot of different people. What I will say, my personal opinion is, I think it's very good for the game. I think it's good for most people involved. I think we had gotten to a point as an industry that we were asking people to make decisions that were life-changing decisions much too early. And that relates to the coaches who had to make decisions based on trying to keep up with the Joneses and having to recruit 8th, 9th, and 10th graders. I think kids were having to make decisions way too early on where they were going to go to college at the age of 19 when they were 13 and 14. As a father of three myself, none of my kids were ready to pick their college when they were a freshman in high school. I can assure you of that. So I think it's going to obviously be a situation where everybody's able to make better decisions. And that's what this should be all about, is let's all make informed decisions, both from the coach's standpoint of who do we need to recruit, who do we need in our program, who fits the bill. You're going to be able to make a lot better decisions on our end later in the process rather than earlier. And I think the same could be said for kids. Kids, what they think is important at 13 and 14, sometimes when they're 17 and 18, that has changed. And I think it's a positive thing for all involved.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, the dad in me, and I only had daughters, and they're all out of the house now, but the dad in me tends to think that you might get that 17-year-old kid or 16 or 15-year-old kid that doesn't quit the sport because he looks around and maybe he sees at 14 all his friends committed, and he says, I'm going to go do something else because I'm not committed and my buddies are. I think that selfishly for me, and I'd love your thoughts on this, it excites me for that kind of 13, 14-year-old, if there's such a thing, fringe player who keeps playing, and all of a sudden maybe he's playing shortstop for you because he kept playing.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point, Darren. We've all heard the terms late bloomer, right? There are a lot of late bloomers in our sport, especially because either you're a late bloomer because you grew later or because you figured out something within your game later, or if you're a pitcher, maybe you gained your control later or your velocity. Our sport is filled with late bloomers. So the later we can make these decisions, the better. And I think it allows guys longer, it allows these kids longer to blossom, to grow into what they're going to be, instead of being told at 13 or 14, well, you're not in the top percentile, you're not being recruited, so you've already missed the boat. You don't miss the boat when you're 14 years old in a recruiting process. So I think it's a very positive thing. I would also say that I think there was some pressure put on all these kids that was unnecessary at those ages. One, if a lot of kids felt pressure if they weren't committed yet, because they looked around and all my buddies are committed and I don't have, what's wrong with me? You get that mentality. By the same token, I think a lot of pressure was put on kids that were committing to major Power 5 schools because that put a lot of attention, a lot of spotlight on kids. And they all of a sudden they had a target on their back every time they played, whether it was for their high school or their travel team or showcases. And that target was put on their backs at much too early an age for kids to have to worry about. We just need to let the kids enjoy playing baseball, enjoy getting better, enjoy all the things that come along with what makes our sport great, the camaraderie, the travel, the going all around the country. There's so many great things that I think now will be able to be enjoyed by a lot of people because we're not putting that pressure on them so early.
Coming off a sweep of Florida this past weekend, as I talked to you about the 23 team as a whole, and you guys have a long way to go on this road, and that's the plan. But what are some of the elements of this team, some of the personality characteristics of this team of which you are most proud?
Well, I think we made a concerted effort this year to make sure that this was a very close team from a bond standpoint. And everybody wants that. Everybody talks about it. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. But I think we were as intentional as we've ever been with trying to help create that and foster that. And it still has to be organic. It still has to be something that you don't force too much, but you have to encourage it. And so what we did from day one is we have a base out here, the Fort Jackson. And so we took the whole team out there a few times during the fall just to kind of, let them all go through these obstacle courses together and have to problem solve together. And so that was kind of the foundation for what this team would be, from an intangible standpoint. From a tangible standpoint, we do a lot of things really well on the ball field. We lead the country in home runs. We're among the best in the country at scoring runs. Our defense on most days is very solid. We lead the SEC in ERA right now. So from a tangible standpoint, we do a lot of things really well on the baseball field. But I think that missing ingredient is that this is a close team because of some of the things we've put together for them to grow. I think we've been intentional about trying to add really high character people to this team. And I think you combine all those things, and that's a good insight into why we are where we are right now.
So I look at an offense that hits 288 as a team, but I see 259 walks. Therefore, it's an on-base percentage of 431. And you talking about how you guys obviously knock it over the boards, but you also create a ton. Can you speak to me about offensive approach? We all know every hitter is different. Some are left, some are right, some are switch. Approaches are all different. But collectively, as an approach, when I see numbers like that, I've got to ask you.
Well, there are different elements of an approach, as you mentioned. Our overriding approach for our hitters is that we want to take good, disciplined at-bats that involve good swing decisions. And again, I use the word intentional. We're very intentional about keeping track of our swing decisions, which then lead to good production, which lead to not chasing outside the zone. That's the starting point, is we're going to have hitters that understand the importance of making good swing decisions. That will lead to more hard hit balls in play. That will lead to more walks, and more base runners obviously lead to more runs, especially if you can hit the ball out of the ballpark the way we do. So our philosophy is that we are going to get on base, and when pitchers make mistakes, we want to do damage. That's the bottom line with us. And we still have some speed guys in our lineup that will play the small game, but our overreaching philosophy is that we're going to be very tough at bats because we make good swing decisions, because we have technically sound swings, and we're going to make sure our guys walk to the plate confident. That's something we work on all the time, is just making sure our guys have earned the right kind of confidence that when you go face a Paul Skeens or the kind of pitchers we have in our league, you feel like, hey, we can go toe-to-toe for them and we don't have to back down from anybody. So I would say that's our overall offensive philosophy, but then you tailor it based on who you're playing that day. Are you facing a pitcher that has a sinker? Are you facing a pitcher that has that rising fastball? Are you facing a guy that's going to give you a lot of off-speed pitches? So we'll tailor our approaches to the pitcher we're facing, but it all starts with that standard philosophy of swing decisions and having good discipline at the plate.
Funny you should mention Paul Skeens, because I looked at an at-bat that Braylon Wimmer had against Paul Skeens earlier this year, in which he crushed the baseball. And I love the story of Braylon Wimmer. I love an athlete who bets on himself, a Yukon, Oklahoma native, but came back to play with you for one more year, drafted to where I'm sure he could have gotten some money to get his life started, but he wanted to play for you one more time. How proud are you of him?
I'm very happy, very appreciative that he came back to our program for another year. Last year, at the end of the year, he was drafted by the Phillies and had a decision to make. And we were talking through it the whole summer. And, it could have gone either way. It was probably 50-50 most of the time. One of the things he wanted the opportunity to do was, if he did come back, Coach, will you give me the opportunity to try to win the shortstop job? No promises, but can I at least have that opportunity all fall? And we provided that, and he's run with it. And so as I look at Braylon, he's a guy that every part of him has evolved and developed and matured. And we're talking on and off the field. He came to us as a very, very thin, athlete a long time ago out of Oklahoma, as you mentioned. And he's bigger, he's stronger, he's more mature. He loves the game more than he ever has. He's a much better teammate than he's ever been. There's just so many things that he's evolved into as a person and as a player that I'm really proud of. Because again, he could have just bailed last year and moved on, and that was it. But he came back to be a centerpiece of a very, very good team. And again, I'm happy for him, but I'm also appreciative that he wanted to do that and still be a part of what we're doing.
I'd love an anecdote about Ethan Petrie. It was a couple of years ago that I watched him as a teammate with his O-Stingers win the famed amateur baseball event in Jupiter, Florida, the World Bat Association World Championship. Well, here he is. It seems like just yesterday he did that. The numbers are great, folks, by the way, 500 on base, 20 home runs. But I'd love a coach's eyes on who he is as a human and as a hitter.
Well, he plays the game like he's still in Little League. And what I mean by that is he shows up with a smile on his face. He shows up thinking he's going to have a lot of success. He's beloved by his teammates, and that's a hard thing to do. Oftentimes you see a freshman come in and get this kind of notoriety and this type of publicity and have this kind of success. And I think it's human nature that older guys that have maybe been around a while tend to get a little bit jealous. It's just human nature. And there's been none of that with Ethan, because he is such a good kid. He's a breath of fresh air. He's a total team guy. He's willing to do whatever we need as a team. And this is a guy that in the preseason went 2 for 19 with 11 strikeouts. He did not start opening day. And I remember talking to him before the season saying, hey, just, keep working hard. Your time will come. The light will go on at some point. Well, the light went on by game 3, and he hasn't come out of the lineup since. And he's been one of the best players in the country, freshman or otherwise. And so it's just a guy you root for, a guy that's very easy to love for our team, for our fans. And look, he's a centerpiece. He's an absolute centerpiece for an offense.
I'd love to know, because I was one of these guys in college and even in the minor leagues. I was one of the guys that sat down and pitched later in the game. And so the names are Chris Veach and Austin Williamson and James Hicks and Eli Jones and Matthew Becker and Nick Proctor, who transferred from Cal, and Eli Jersenbeck, who's a freshman. There's a couple of freshmen in that group. That's the bullpen. And I know there are more arms, and I know some of those guys start midweek for you, but those gentlemen and their numbers are daunting when you stack them up. Speak on behalf of them as a group and how proud you are of them.
Well, Justin Parker, our pitching coach, has done a great job with those guys, both in developing their individual talent, but also explaining why they need to buy into a certain role. Our weekend rotation as we started the year was 3 returning guys in Sanders, Hall, and Mahoney. Very experienced, very talented guys, all pro prospects. And so we knew the bullpen would be made up of the remaining guys who all were if not equally talented, pretty darn close. And so we've had guys buy into their roles, the James Hickses of the world, the Beaches. We've got a lot of guys. Matthew Becker now has come on to be our Sunday starter in Noah Hall's absence. These are all guys that they could start, but on our team with those 3 guys on the weekend have formed a very formidable bullpen. And I think if you look at most great teams, they are good early in the game on the mound, and they're good late in the game on the mound. So we're very fortunate that we have a number of guys that we can go to. It's depth, it's talent, it's makeup. And so one of the reasons why we're having the success we are, our home runs get a lot of attention and our runs get a lot of attention. But when you have a 3.23 ERA these days in our league, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, the bullpen guys are closing it down for you. I'm always going to give the love to the bullpen. Mark, thanks for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. And congratulations on thus far what your squad has accomplished, and best of luck the rest of the way.
I appreciate it, Daron. Thanks for having me on.
Number one team in the land as it pertains to RPI is South Carolina as we speak. That's a tough spot to hold on to. When we come back, we'll have a conversation. Craig Cozart will join us. We'll take a tour around college baseball, not just the SEC, but everywhere. This is Perfect Game College Baseball. Thanks for watching us on Perfect Game TV. Longtime college baseball coach and leader of Perfect Game on the scouting side, especially at the college level, and helping us create such great content is Craig Cozart, and he spends time with us now. Cozy, thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it.
Great to see you again, Daron.
We just got done having a really insightful conversation with Mark Kingston, and the number one team currently in the RPI. They've had an incredible year. They've been a discussion point for you and I, you and Vinny, you and Hunter. We've talked about him all year long, and he opened up his head just a little bit. It was thoughtful. I know you have some thoughts on Mark as it pertains to his tenure with South Carolina as we sit here today.
Yeah, Mark, just a great guy. He's the kind of guy you want your son to play for. He does things the right way. He cares about his kids. Long time coach in the profession. And, I thought it was very interesting that, he came in there and right away was able to take South Carolina to the Super Regionals back in 2008. Then they played a 500 season the following year in 19, went to the regionals again in 21, and then they were under 500 last year, for the first time in a long time. And that fan base is passionate. They know baseball. They have high expectations. Their expectations are to go to the College World Series every year. And, there was a lot of noise in the background about whether or not Mark Kingston was the right guy, just to be perfectly honest. But Ray Tanner, the AD there, stood by him. Ray's obviously a tremendous baseball guy, was the head coach there for a long, long time, just finished, I think, 25 total years at South Carolina. I think he knew what Mark was building there, stood by him, and they're really reaping the benefits of that this year.
Yeah, and it's fun to see. What a great conversation, as you can imagine. I know you've known him for a long, long time, enjoyed getting to learn from him. So we're now knee deep, and I talked to Mark about this, and he had some interesting thoughts. I'm sure it doesn't surprise you, but we're now here. Now the recruiting changes are here, and as people watch this show, the April 26th date will come and go. This August 1st date of the junior year will become very big. You and I haven't talked about it for a week yet. I'm guessing you've talked to a ton of people about it over the last week. What have you learned?
Yeah, I think that some people are trying to get out in front of it a little bit. You've seen a lot of underclassmen commits in the last week to week and a half. So there's a mad rush for teams to get kids committed that they've already established relationships with. But now what I'm hearing is that camps are going to be that much more prevalent. We'll see what the NCAA feels about satellite camps. Are they going to be able to go off campus and do camps at various locations? And, of course, there's the uncertainty as to whether or not things are going to happen under the table. There's still a lot to be decided. And it comes down to integrity. When it's all said and done, this is what's best for the sport. It's what's best for the families and the kids, and it's going to be what's best for NCAA baseball overall. I think it's the calm before the storm, and people are trying to figure out what their angle can be and how they can find a little niche to give them an advantage, because that's what it's all about. But it's going to be interesting for sure to watch it going forward.
Yeah, the under the table thing. I rarely opine on this show, but that sounds kind of gross. And let's hope that that is something that we don't hear much about. Let's hope that nobody gets found out for that, because again, we're talking about minors, and a lot of times it's the parents that will be the leaders. And so I'm excited about some good things going on, some positive things. It's interesting. It's very interesting. As interesting as last weekend was for who? Florida, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, ECU, Virginia, and Louisville. All of them elite programs, historically elite. ECU, there is no better mid-major, right?
Right.
And they all went winless this past week. And now I want to give credit to South Carolina. I want to give credit to Tennessee, Georgia, Wichita State, and Notre Dame and Duke. I want to give credit to the teams that did the sweeping, so we can go either way. But what a wild week as you guys built the rankings.
Yeah. You know what? Me and Vinny almost just threw out last week's poll and started over from scratch. It was the most asinine thing. We're sitting here watching, because by the time we get into Saturday night and then into, our afternoon games on Sunday, we're watching inning by inning to see what's going to happen as we're making our decisions. We put a lot of pride into the top 25, and to have 6 of your top 10 teams go winless on the weekend was just amazing. Now, I don't know, obviously the common thread here was they were all on the road, which was, something that we looked at, and we know what the RPI says as far as playing on the road. But to see those teams go down winless, and some of them, like Vanderbilt, in very, very profound fashion, was very interesting, and just tells you how difficult this thing is. The landscape of college baseball has never been better. The parity within college baseball has never been better. We haven't spoken about Wichita State all year, and then they beat perennial power East Carolina 3 times soundly, shut them out twice. Only gave up 3 runs on the entire weekend. So that just shows you how difficult this thing is.
Yeah, Cozy, I'm glad you mentioned Wichita State, because here they are. They're 14-5 in their last 19 games, playing very, very well, moved inside the top 90 RPI. And Lauren Hibb, who is their interim head coach, a wonderful story there at Wichita State.
Yeah, so I guess we've kind of slept on them a little bit, but their pitching staff is really complete. When I looked at it, I think it's 15 of their 24 wins have been credited to their starting rotation. So that tells you those guys are getting deep into the game, setting them up in a good way from a bullpen standpoint. So that's a credit to them. Peyton Tolley, we haven't talked about him all year, but he's a legit two-way guy. He goes out and throws that shutout. He was our player of the week, but the guy's batting .321 with 8 home runs and 38 RBIs. So he's like, I don't want to say the poor man's version of Joe Caglione, but here we are, another left-handed pitcher, left-handed hitter that is doing amazing things. But going back to Lauren Hibbs, a longtime friend of mine. He was at Charlotte for, I think, 27 years, won over 800 games at Charlotte. And he decided, you know what, it was time to do something different. He wanted to go back home to Wichita, where he played collegiately, to be the director of baseball operations. And, some things got out of whack with the previous head coach there. And all of a sudden he's named and in December, the interim head coach. And here they are back in the national spotlight. So what a credit to him and his staff to really stabilize things there, but obviously take them to the next level. And the one thing I know about Lauren Hibbs is he loves the college game. He loves student athletes. He's got a very calm demeanor about him. So he was the perfect guy to take this thing over. He's a baseball Hall of Famer in the state of Kansas. So for him to come back and potentially take them to the first NCAA tournament in quite a while and maybe beyond is a really neat story in college baseball for sure. I'm
glad you talked about Tolley. I also want to talk about BYU's Austin Deming. Look at Deming. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year in 2018 in Utah. He's just been a mainstay at BYU, but this year the offense is crazy. Last week he was over the boards, but he's got 14 home runs this year. As a matter of fact, his 1728 OPS would lead the nation if he had enough plate appearances to qualify. Tell us about Austin.
Yeah, he's really hitting his stride, handling the hot corner. Massive 4-game week for him, hitting 705. I mean, just think about the number of runs. He scored 11 runs, 4 doubles, 4 home runs, and 15 RBIs. That's as many as a lot of players that play every day have on the season so far. So his slash line, he's batting .436. He's got 16 doubles, 14 home runs, and 50 RBI on the year. BYU's got some work to do in the West Coast Conference, obviously, but he's been a big part of what they're doing, and it's neat to see somebody that's mature and really spent his tenure there at BYU having a great season.
Talk to me about the mid-majors. Coastal Carolina at the 5 spot. Dallas Baptist 6. You've got Campbell. You've got ECU. You've got UConn. You've got Indiana State. You've got UTSA. All of these teams, mid-majors, that have, caught your guys' wandering eye, and you've wandered into their room.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever seen a poll or had a poll where we have 3 non-Power 5 teams in the top 10 with Coastal, DBU, and Campbell. But, those 3 teams are legitimate, and they all have legitimate opportunities. Campbell, a little tough with their RPI where it is right now. The league play has drug them down a little bit, but Coastal's definitely in line for a host if they can, hold strong and do what they've been doing. And with the other teams in the state of Texas kind of scrambling, let's be honest, the most likely candidate right now to be a host is Dallas Baptist. And what a beautiful venue. What a great place for college baseball. So that would be really cool. East Carolina is going to be fine. They obviously still have a chance to host, but they got to get going a little bit. They sit third in the American right now. UConn does their thing. They are as consistent as they come. And I'm really excited about Indiana State. You don't go to Vanderbilt in the midweek and throw a shutout and score 9 runs if you're not legitimate. So they're the real deal. And UTSA jumped back in our poll once again. So it's pretty exciting to have 7 out of the top 25 teams being from non-Power 5 conferences.
Cozy, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We really appreciate it.
Yep, you the man, Sut. Appreciate it. Take care. Have a great week.
Yeah, thank you, Cozy. We appreciate it. We also want to thank Mark Kingston for joining us. What an insightful show. Not too far from Route 66. My name's Daron Sutton. Thanks for spending time with us on Perfect Game College Baseball. See you next week.